this is indicative of how long I'm going to speak. Thank you so much to Michelle for that wonderful land acknowledgement and explanation of how privileged we are to be here. And also to Natasha for introducing me and also making this event possible. I would have lost my fucking mind without her. That's first F-bomb if anybody wants to keep track. This is the first time I've done any public speaking in about 3 years. And I'm scared shitless, I can't lie.
It'll be fine.
Talking about privilege, there's a lot of privilege that I have to acknowledge about what has brought me to this point tonight. And so I should probably go back and give a little bit of personal history about what brought me here and who really helped bring me here. Back in 1993, at the age of 25, I finished my undergraduate in history at University of Calgary. And like many people who do an undergraduate degree, I packed on some weight. And I decided that just as an impetus to change, that I was going to get in shape before proposing marriage to my wonderful girlfriend. And then many years later, I was working out with some friends, and they were all doing this very popular thing called Body for Life. And I just made a crack that I was on the Body for Wife program. and they laughed, and somebody said, oh, you should write a book called that. And I'm like, yeah, I should. I never actually wrote that book, but I did make my website, bodyforwife.com. And when we're speaking about privilege, I have to acknowledge just how incredibly privileged I have been to have the lovely Heidi by my side for over 33 years. None of this could have happened without her. For anyone who is a writer in the audience, I highly recommend marrying a doctor. Makes a big difference, very supportive doctor. But so I ended up after the master's in history, I got an MBA so I could actually get a fucking job. And worked in marketing for a while, and then by about the age of 40, I was like, I'm getting really sick of this shit. I wanted to be a writer. It didn't necessarily matter what I wanted to write about, I wanted to write full-time for a living. Fitness was something that I learned a lot about, and I thought, fine, I'll be a fitness writer. And the person who gave me my first shot is here tonight. Elaine Kupser, who is the publisher of Impact Magazine. Thank you very much. So I wrote my first article for Impact Magazine in 2009 and wrote many more over the years. A year after that, I was the fitness columnist for the Los Angeles Times. And 2 years after that, I had a column in the Chicago Tribune that was being published around the world. And so I was doing quite well for a writer. Anybody who's a writer knows what that means. That qualification means. And but then I had these delusions of grandeur that I was going to make it big, and I kept telling my wife, it's like one of these days I'm going to get it big. Things are really going to work out. I think she never gave any indication that she was sick of hearing us do this shit. And 2019 was supposed to be my year. That was going to be my year because I got a big publishing deal. I kind of transitioned a bit away from the fitness writing into more sort of general self-help kind of stuff. And so I was writing I published a very science-based analysis of the life-changing epiphany called The Holy Shit Moment. It was published by St. Martin's in the United States and HarperCollins in the UK. There was like 2 national TV spots I did and a lot of radio and podcasts and the whole bit. Didn't fucking sell. I learned in hindsight that when it comes to self-help books, people do not want hard science and facts and critical analysis and step-by-step plans on this is the shit that you need to do. They want fluff and platitudes and being told to wash your face or some shit like that. So that didn't work out. Early 2020, my writing career is kind of on life support. There was no money coming in. I thought, well, fuck it, I guess I'll do a speaking career. Which, how am I doing?
Yeah.
But then there was a pandemic. Kind of hard to start a speaking career when there is a plague rampaging over the land. And I was despondent, feeling desperate. I didn't know what the fuck I was going to do. And it was April 17th. I remember the date very clearly. I was out for a bike ride, which is where a lot of my good and also fucked up ideas come. And it popped into my head that I could write an honest day in history post, throw in some profanity, sarcasm, make it a bit funny, and just post it to my Facebook page. So I went home, I looked up something for April 18th, and I wrote it up and I posted it the next day. And it was moderately popular. It did okay. And because I didn't have anything else going on, I thought, well, fuck it, I'll do another one for the next day. And so I wrote that one and posted it on April 19th. And that is the one that changed everything. So I am going to read that story to you now. It's from volume 1. Okay, April 19th, 1927. Your mom had sex. And so did Mae West. Mae was even in a play about sex. And it was called Sex. And she went to jail for it because 1927 and Puritans. Now most people like fucking. Even Puritans like sex, but only in ways that their God said was okay. They got their multiple layers of panties in a bunch if anyone hosted a bedroom rodeo in a way that the Sky Fairy didn't approve. Puritanism began in the 1530s in England when King Henry VIII, who definitely liked fucking, told the Catholic Church to suck dicks, and he started the Church of England. The Puritans thought this new church was not fully reformed, and they said, fuck it, figuratively, and did their own thing. The name Puritan was actually an insult that emerged in the 1560s because they slavishly followed the Bible as a guide to daily life. And then a bunch of them fucked off to America, and along with folks from several other religions based in the teachings of that uptight motherfucker John Calvin, spent the next several centuries expending a lot of energy trying to dictate what other people could do with those fun things between their legs. Enter Mae West, figuratively speaking. Her first Broadway role was in the aforementioned Sex, which she not only starred in, but also wrote, produced, and directed. Now, one of the things Puritans and other Calvinist-based religions were fond of was lobbying the government to enforce moral standards. The play was popular, which certain religious groups could not abide because women were supposed to be humble and humble and obedient and not enjoy making their own decisions, especially if that decision involved fucking someone other than their husband. These religious groups complained to city officials who had police raid the theater and arrest the entire cast. On April 19th, West was sentenced to 10 days in jail for corrupting the morals of youth. She could have paid the fine, but she took the jail term like a champ and made a statement about the levels of bullshit it all was. Go Mae. The jail term stirred up great publicity, and she was crowned the darling bad girl of the era. Not one to back down, her next play was about homosexuality. So that one kind of blew up. And there were comments on the Facebook post that said, well, you should do an entire year's worth of these and turn them into a book. And I said, you're goddamn right I should. So, having written a book about the science of the life-changing epiphany, I kind of come to recognize these things. And I'm like, yeah, this is life-changing. This is something that I have to do. All the self-help fitness stuff was done, and this was what I was planning moving forward. And so I just kept writing these stories and posting them every day. And after a month, I collected some data, and I told my agent, I said that this is what I've been doing, and there was 1 million views in the first month. And he said, yeah, that's really cool, but I don't think I can sell it. And my wife said, fuck the publishing industry, self-publish. Yeah, she swears. So she was very confident in the ability for me to make this work, much more so than I was. And so that's what I did, and I started at her insistence. I started a subscription program, and that started making a lot of money. And then on the 1-year anniversary of the idea, April 17th, 2021, we published volume 1, and 17 months later, it has sold over 30,000 copies. Which I don't know if you know anything, that's a lot. That puts it, for actually traditionally published books, that puts it in about the top 1 or 2%. And that's without bookstore presence or PR campaign, just social media, getting the word out. And speaking of social media, that's another privilege that I have to acknowledge is, the people that have followed me on Facebook, that a lot of the stories that are in these 2 books, at least a quarter, maybe a third of them, were suggested by followers of my Facebook page. They also, found grammatical fixes and typos and, even fact check when I fuck something up, historically speaking. And also, tone changes when I, failed to show undue compassion about something. You're trying to swear and be funny, and sometimes you cross the line. And so it was really very helpful for me. And when I started this, I had 80,000 followers on the page. It took me 9 years to build that. A little over 2 years later, there's 250,000. So I would say that that's indicative of me being a better history writer than I ever was a fitness writer. But they've been very, very appreciative, very forgiving of my strange sense of humor and my very bad puns. So speaking of bad puns, I'm going to read another story now from volume 1. Where is it? Okay, this one is July 30th, 1419. Now, most kids, when they learn what defenestrate means, have a reaction of, why do they need a word for that? Combined with, that's funny. Now, as it turns out, defenestration, the throwing of a person from a window, has a rich history. The Czechs were big fans, doing it a few times in Prague between the 15th and 17th centuries. Now, in the first one, they chose a window quite high from the ground and attained the expected results of icky ground splatter. But there were additional consequences. In 1415, Jan Hus, an influential Czech theologian and church reformer, was burned at the stake because the church don't need no reforming. His followers, Hussites, were vexed. There was much discontent among Hussites because of the inequalities between church leaders and the nobility and the peasantry. Eventually, they got pissed enough that on July 30th, 1419, a crowd of Hussites marched to the town hall in Prague. Now, supposedly, the Hussite priest leading the group was hit from a rock thrown from a window of the town hall, and it gave everyone a grand fucking idea. They stormed into the building and threw the judge, the chief magistrate, and several members of the town council from the top window. And they died, because those kind of Czechs don't bounce. It's fucking terrifying. Mass death by defenestrating mob was now a thing, and so was the civil war that it started. Many more deaths came during the Hussite Wars, which would last for 17 years. And then the group did it again in 1483, except it was more symbolic because the Prague politicians they were pissed at had already been killed in a coup, so they threw corpses out the window as an additional, fuck you. In 1618 was the third defenestration of Prague, and sometimes it gets called the second one because throwing dead bodies doesn't count or some shit. Anyway, it's the 1618 one, and it was a gooder, although I guess it depends on your perspective. In 1618, plenty of people were getting into this Protestantism thing that had begun a century earlier when Martin Luther nailed the list to the church door of 95 reasons why the Catholic Church can fuck all the way off. The Protestants and Catholics in Prague weren't getting along so well, and some Protestants threw a bunch of Catholic governors out of the windows of Prague Castle and took over the government. None of them died because they landed in a big soft pile of poo. Well, Catholics said that they were saved by angels, but having their falls broken by a massive donkey does sound more probable. Anyway, that third bit of defenestration initiated the 30 Years' War, in which 8 million people died. Fun times.
Fun times.
So, you may have noticed just a teeny bit of disdain for religion.
No, not at all.
Prior to becoming the sweary historian, I was a little more measured in some of my writing, more humorous strain. And that was because, you know, I was trying to write what the publishing industry was telling me that they wanted, and I was trying to write what I thought maybe other people wanted to buy. And this was me reaching a point of, fuck that. I'm writing what I want to write the way that I want to write it, and if other people like it, great. So it was just sort of James Unchained. And self-publishing is what allowed me to do that, because nobody else wanted to touch it. So, you know, their loss, I guess. But it's important to acknowledge, again, this is, I need to keep reiterating the privilege that has put me up here tonight. When I say self-publishing, it's not just this one self. There were a lot of other people involved in it, in addition to my wife. And also, you know, like, I was writing all these during COVID, and my kids were actually really understanding. They didn't drive me completely insane during that time. But I also had, there's a few people in attendance tonight. One of my designers, Avery, is here tonight, as well as Avery's done wonderful work. I will continue to work with her. And Karen, my copy editor, who these stories started off as like a Facebook stream of consciousness writing where I was constantly breaking lots of grammatical rules. And she knew which rules that should remain broken and other ones that's like, no, Jen, you can't fucking do this. And she fixed that. So again, another person I will love to continue working with. And also Jennifer, my proofreader, is here tonight, who just had an amazing eye for catching all sorts of little mistakes. And my friend Mark lives on the other side of the country. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight, but he's also the one that managed the entire publishing process of getting it, you know, hooked up with the print on demand and all of the sales sites and that kind of thing, and making sure the books turned out looking really nice. So, so thank you to all of them. Okay, time for another story. Let's do one with a Canadian angle on it. This one, from August 24th, 1914. My best friend is a paramedic. He's also here tonight. When he was new at his job, he was in the back of an ambulance with an injured child. The kid asked my friend to sing to him to take his mind off the trauma. My friend broke out into the only children's song he knew, the story of Winnie the Pooh. It's based on a real bear. On the eve of World War I, Canadian Lieutenant Harry Colborne, a veterinarian, was traveling by train from his hometown of Winnipeg to the Atlantic coast to catch a ship for Europe to face battle. During a stop in Ontario on August 24th, 1914, he encountered a hunter who had killed a black bear, only to discover the bear had a cub. Knowing the bear was doomed to die, Colborne said, "Hey, I'll give you $20 for the cub." "Sold," said the hunter. Named Winnipeg Bear for his home, and later shortened to Winnie, the bear cub tagged along with Colborne on a ship bound for England. While there, Winnie became something of a mascot to the Canadian soldiers of Cavalry Regiment Fort Garry Horse, camped in Salisbury Plain. When they weren't training for the front lines in France, they played with her. Yeah, I know the cartoon bear is male, but the original Winnie from Canada was female. Colborne kept Winnie at the London Zoo. He served 3 years in the war as a cavalry veterinarian, attaining the rank of major. Winnie attained the rank of internationally beloved bear, thanks to the creative efforts of A.A. Milne. Colborne frequently visited Winnie at the zoo while on leave, and had intended to bring her back to Canada with him after the war, but when he saw how beloved the bear was by children visiting the zoo, he decided it was best for her to remain in London. One of the children who became enamored of Winnie was Milne's son, Christopher Robin Milne. Now, Chris Rob loved Winnie so much he named his own teddy bear Winnie, adding the Pooh because his friend had a pet swan named Pooh. So, why the fuck not? Also, fucking swan for a pet? That makes less sense than a bear. Swans are basically geese, and geese are fucking evil. You thought I was gonna get through this one without swearing, didn't you? Then the motherfucking geese showed up. Anyway, A.A. Milne, inspired by his son's adoration of Winnie, published Winnie the Pooh in 1926, creating what would become one of the most beloved children's characters of all time. The real Winnie lived in the London Zoo. at the London Zoo until her death in 1934. So, that seems like a good segue into talking about swearing. The first Avengers movie, there's a scene where Cap says to Dr. Bruce Banner, you gotta unleash the Hulk. Time to get angry so we can fight the bad guys. Bruce says, that's my secret. I'm always angry. I'm always swearing. That's who I am. My mother was a stockbroker. My father worked as a carpenter. I learned all the good sentence enhancers at a young age. And when I was writing for the LA Times, the Chicago Tribune, and Chatelaine, that was me like keeping a lid on it. So this was just, a lot of people have referred to it as, it's a gimmick or it's a shtick. And like, you could say that, but no, this is just me communicating the way that I prefer to communicate. And if you got a problem with it, I'll fuck you. The thing that really surprised me was a month after we published Volume 1, was people started posting in the comments on my Facebook page pictures of their kids, their teens, and even their tweens reading my book, saying, yeah, I bought your book, my fucking kid stole it. My kid who doesn't like history, doesn't even like reading, took my book and won't give it back. And I was like, I didn't write this book for kids. But now that I think about it, it's like, actually, I can kind of see how that worked out. So, of course, not one to pass up on an opportunity to make money, turned that into a marketing gimmick and said, hey, you need to buy this book for your fucking kid, and they're gonna like it. So that actually, those little marketing messages ended up, a lot of kids got Volume 1 for Christmas last year. So having kids like my book is just about the greatest endorsement I could possibly think of. But I'm going to read just one more story, and then I'll wrap things up. And this is one of the most important stories that I think I've written, and it's in Volume 2, and the date, it's from February 16th, 2019. Be a Don Cheadle, not a Dave Chappelle. Why? Because Chappelle believes one of the most marginalized groups on the planet should be made fun of. Conversely, on February 16th, 2019, Don Cheadle hosted Saturday Night Live wearing a t-shirt that read, "Protect Trans Kids." Now, Don didn't say anything, and it's okay, you can clap. Don didn't say anything, he just wore the shirt for a bit. And the media said lots the next day, and so did social media. Much of the commentary was positive, but much was not, because some folks just love to hate trans people. They even build an identity around it, making it a cornerstone of their comedy act, or putting silly descriptors like gender critical in their online bios, because they imagine that what is between a person's legs is all that matters. Well, fuck those bigots. And enough about recent history, let's look way back, because trans people have existed for as long as people have existed. The term transgender is new, but they are not. Records from ancient Mesopotamia going back about 5,000 years refer to priests of the goddess Inanna called Gala that may have been trans. Graves from a few thousand years ago in northern Iraq reveal burial rites that show they considered gender to be a spectrum. Archaeologists discovered different funerary artifacts for men than for women, and also different offerings for a third gender. In 2011, archaeologists discovered a 5,000-year-old grave near Prague of a biological male buried with the funerary rites of a woman. In 5th century Lebanon, a person assigned female at birth masculinized their name to Marinos and joined a monastery as a child, living the rest of his life as a man, not even revealing his sex, not gender, after being falsely accused of fathering a child, but rather accepting 3 years of exile as punishment. His sex was only revealed upon his death. Elagabalus served as Roman emperor under the name Antoninus from 218 to 222, and was certainly trans. Contemporary Roman historian and statesman Cassius Dio referred to Elagabalus with female pronoun. Legally, Heracles was the wife of Elagabalus, but Dio wrote that the husband of this woman, meaning Elagabalus, was Heracles. Dio wrote that Elagabalus preferred to be referred to as a wife and a queen, a lady, not a lord. She dressed and adorned herself as a woman of the time and reportedly offered a fortune to any surgeon who could give her a vagina. Now, the Sanskrit epic Mahabharata, written in India 2,300 years ago, tells the story of a trans man named Siddhandi. Now, these stories are barely a sample. Across areas and eras, trans and non-binary people have lived and loved and been both accepted and maligned. The prevalence of hate is nonsensical. In 2018, Dr. Joshua Safer, executive director of the Center of Transgender Medicine at Mount Sinai Hospital, said, "Being transgender is not a matter of choice. It is not a fad. It is generally an overwhelming sense that their gender is not the one on their birth certificate." So when it came time to promote Volume 2, I had to choose 2 stories as samples, for my website, for the Amazon listings. And that was one of the stories I chose. And I knew that there would be people that would read that sample and say, "Oh, fuck, this will bullshit on my book." Yeah, fine, fuck you. I don't want you reading my book. Piss off. So I know that, I think a lot of us are getting kind of tired about most of history just being, the wonderful, grandiose, noble tales of white men doing amazing things. Well, you know what? There was a lot of amazing things by people that don't have pale skin or a penis. So I have done my best to tell a lot of those stories in my book, as well as, instead of giving the whitewashed version of history, giving the unwashed version. And so yeah, there's been some hate mail. And at the beginning of Open Volume 2, I actually put some of that hate mail in there for your enjoyment. And I used that hate mail in order to sell more books, because fuck them. Speaking of selling books, I think we still have some left. So please, I don't want to have to load them home. Also, I make a lot more money if you buy it here than if you buy it off Amazon. So that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And please don't drink and drive. Yeah, can I make more money? Oh, okay, great.
I asked him to make you.